Hi all, my name is Ryan and welcome to my channel What the Pop, where we discuss pop culture in general and Buffy a lot. The usual spoiler alert. I may talk about things in these analyses that relate to future plot points, so if you haven't seen all of Buffy yet and don't like spoilers, I suggest you like the channel, then come back once you've seen it all. Today we continue our look at Season 2 with Episode 10, What's My Line, Part 2. A plot summary. Buffy and Kendra stop the Biffo long enough to see Giles and find out what the hell is going on. They realise Buffy did die, only for a minute, triggering the next Slayer. Kendra finds out Angel is good, confesses to locking him in a room with Eastern exposure. Willie sells Angel to Spike. Spike wants to take things slow. He's been hurt before. Buffy and Kendra arrive, there's no dust, they conclude Angel wasn't barbecued. Spike takes Angel back to the warehouse, Drew wants a playdate. Buffy briefly contemplates quitting Slayerdom and handing the reins to Kendra. Giles and Kendra bond, she's far more a by-the-book Slayer than Buffy. Buffy didn't even know there was a book. Worm Assassin attacks Cordelia and Xander, they hide in the basement, fight, passionately kiss, then get the hell out of there. At Career Day, the police officer attacks Buffy with a few guns, Oz pushes Willow out the way, gets himself shot. Police assassin gets kicked in the face by Kendra, then escapes using Jonathan as a meat shield. Giles has figured out that they need Drusilla's sire. Buffy tells them that Angel is her vampire daddy. Meanwhile, Drew has Angel tied up and shirtless, and quite a few of us have had this dream. She's torturing him. He tries to get Spike to stake him. Spike is too smart for that. Kendra and Buffy visit Willie, knock him around a bit. He takes Buffy to the ritual. Angel and Drew are tied together, Spike does the ritual and stabs them through the hand. Buffy shows up and gets caught. Kendra bursts in, followed by the Scoobies. There's Biffo all round. Buffy interrupts the ritual and saves Angel, Spike grabs Drew to leave, a pipe organ collapses on them. The Slayers grab Angel and leave, leaving Spike and Drew to burn. Oz and Willow talk animal crackers. The Slayer is who Buffy is, she's no longer the only freak. Kendra doesn't hug. Drew rises like a phoenix, renewed and strong, pulls Spike from the rubble. This episode is Marty Noxon's first solo writing credit, and what I found really insightful about the script writing process was when Marty talked about how this story was never imagined as being a two-parter, but there was just too much they had to cover, and so they had to make it into a two-parter. And one of the things she mentioned is that often with a two-parter, when you're writing, you find you only have the story for maybe 1.5 episodes. So you end up with quite a lot of filler. But she felt there was no filler in this particular two-parter. I agree with her. I think both this one and Becoming Part 1 and 2 may actually be some of the best written two-parters in all of television. There is nothing in them that is extraneous and everything has a purpose. Take for instance the Angel torture scene. Apart from an excuse to get David Boreanaz shirtless, because let's face it, sex sells, Drusilla's dialogue here helps to paint Angelus as a monster, particularly when she talks about him ripping her family's throats out. This does a lot to increase the threat when Angel turns, because we keep hearing from Giles and now Kendra that he is a monster. But it's mostly from Drew that we get specific examples of how much of a monster he actually was. And this scene does a particularly good job of setting up the dynamics between the three of them for later on in the season. But we'll talk about that when we get to it. Now, speaking of a little BDSM, Marty Noxon really ramps the kink up in this episode, which she said was intentional in the script, but she's not the first one to suggest that vampires, or at least vampires connected to Angel, like a bit of kink. It has precedent. In the Season 1 episode Angel, Darla, Angel's sire and past lover, said after Angel had grabbed her and pushed her up against the wall, "You're hurting me," and then smiles at him. That's good too. Spike in Lover's Walk says that Drew likes to be tied up and tortured. You have Angel tied up and tortured here, and Darla seems to like it a bit rough and kinky, and when Buffy and Spike have sex in a much later season, it's so rough they bring the house down around them. It certainly seems like everyone in this little group is anything but vanilla. Now, while the storytelling is all well and good and Angel shirtless is great, let's talk about the absolute best thing in both of these episodes. Animal crackers. The animal crackers scene may well be my, and I'm sure many other Buffy's fans, favourite non-Buffy scene in all of the show. What's most amazing about it, what we learned from Marty Noxon on the DVD commentary, is that most of that conversation was unscripted, just Seth Green and Alison Hannigan ad-libbing. Marty said she wrote the line about the monkey pants, but most of the rest was ad-libbed by the actors. So the quick riff of Oz saying, "I bark you with my monkey pants," and Willow asking, "The monkey is French?" and Oz replying, "All monkeys are French," is some creative genius, which, given Seth Green is one of the creative forces behind Robot Chicken, is expected. But it's great to see Ali riffing here too. Given this was ad-libbed, it's awesome to see the chemistry that Alison Hannigan and Seth Green already have. I mentioned previously in another episode that they had worked with each other before, and you can see it in how comfortable they are together. The seamless way Oz tells Willow she has the cutest smile, then just continues on with talking about monkey pants and wondering if the hippo is jealous, and the line of all monkeys being French. It is all absolutely perfect and is probably the sweetest moment in all of Buffy. Of course, we get Xander and Cordelia's first and second kiss here. Another reason this episode is so beloved by the fandom. There isn't much bad in this episode. We talked about Kendra's accent in the last episode, so I won't say anything else. The bug assassin is still a stupid concept and gets beaten by some Wile E. Coyote Acme glue on the ground trap tactic here. The only other thing is the pipe organ that collapses on Spike and Drew clearly was made of balsa wood and cardboard because it crumbled like it had no strength and had no real weight in its collapse. While Buffy is often put forward as a feminist hero, the Slayer line as a whole and the Watchers Council that guide and control them is most definitely not. With Kendra, we learn how an identified potential is treated and trained, and none of it is good. The first thing to note about Kendra is that her past reveals that the Watchers Council has some way of identifying at least some potentials to inherit the Slayer mantle. Kendra was identified as a potential at a young age and given to her Watcher. It was seen as a great honour among her people to be a potential and to receive training to be a Slayer. She was so young that she can't even remember her parents. We see this reflected in Season 7 too, when it appears that some of the potentials already had some training prior to getting to Buffy. The second thing that the activation of another Vampire Slayer shows us is how completely useless the Watchers Council is these days. Buffy died, another Slayer was called, and no one in the Watchers Council thought to contact Giles, to talk to him about how Buffy died, to ask him if what killed her is still on the loose, or to get the Watcher's diaries he would have been writing. It's this same incompetence that means Giles is unaware of Faith being activated, that Faith's Watcher had died, or that Gwendolyn Post wasn't her real Watcher. It's this same incompetence that completely botches trying to capture Faith when she tries to run. But the worst thing about the Watchers Council is how they treat potentials and activated Slayers. Like any religious sect, the Watchers are a cult. The only difference is that the Watchers actually have real power to wield against a vast array of very real enemies. But like most religions and cults, a lot of what they do is about maintaining and controlling that power. Usually potentials and Slayers are kept isolated, removed from a social existence. Kendra says that she wasn't allowed to have friends and wasn't allowed to talk to boys, that these things were a distraction from her sacred duty. She was groomed to a life focused only on slaying, a living weapon who eats, sleeps and breathes their sacred calling. Slayers are taught that their duty is sacred, that they are special, that they alone can make a difference and may be the only thing that stands between the world and any potential apocalypses. All of these things were the same indoctrination spiel that Ampata received in Inca Mummy Girl, that had her sacrificed to prevent some unknown evil from arising, that didn't arise when she was gone. The Slayers are taught that emotions cloud your judgment, that remaining emotionless and a clear mind are better for combat. They are required to study, to know the enemy, once again focusing them on slaying, on being a better weapon. This indoctrination and control are nothing new to religion, to cults in general. It's how they perpetuate. It's how they maintain the power. And in Buffy you see why they do it. Buffy hasn't been indoctrinated into this cult. She's grown up being popular, having friends, doing girly stuff. So while she accepts that she is the Slayer, we saw in Inca Mummy Girl that she was annoyed and pushing back at the rigidity with which she was being controlled. Something that Kendra, who was immersed and indoctrinated into this cult at a young age, would never do. I mentioned in a previous episode that Slayers were basically indentured to their Watcher, that one of the reasons Slayers were called as teenagers rather than as adults was so they were reliant on their Watcher to essentially provide them with food and shelter, and was one of the main reasons that Watchers received a salary from the Council, but Slayers don't. It was all a means to control the major weapon that the Council has against the forces of evil. Once again, the patriarchy trying to ensure that they remain at the top despite the fact that the power isn't theirs. And in future episodes we see the Council desperately trying to exert that control, and when they lose it, trying to wrest it back. But I'll discuss those issues as they arise. I mentioned earlier that the Watchers Council was incompetent after Buffy's death. I think, however, this was done on purpose, that they knew of the existence of Kendra and knew that Buffy was still alive. Kendra was the sort of Slayer they actually wanted, one who was compliant and easily controlled, so they actively tried to keep Kendra away from Buffy. We see already how much their short interactions influences Kendra, and I think the Council was trying to avoid this outcome. Desperate men trying desperately to maintain some level of control. We talked earlier in the season about how coupling was a major theme of this season. Those relationships we make as we mature, and two of them start in a big way this episode, and in part 1 we got the first real depiction of Angel and Buffy as a believable couple. We also get a lot of Spike and Drusilla in this episode, and a lot of the groundwork for Spike and Buffy. Spike is inexplicably drawn to Buffy, and Buffy to him, and we've seen it constantly in their interactions so far. Buffy not taking a stake to their first fight, not dusting him in Halloween, honouring her word in Lie to Me, and in this episode Buffy and Kendra switching opponents so she could face Spike. On Spike's part, he's pretty much always thinking about her. Stalking her in the Bronze, having someone film her so he could study her in Halloween. All his thoughts are about her, even when he's looking for Drew's cure. It's fascinating to look back at, because initially Spike was supposed to die in this episode, paving the way for Angelus as the big bad. So the fact this connection wasn't written in is rather fortuitous for the way the story went. But I'll discuss that further in much later episodes as it arises. If we look at the main couples, we currently have Buffy and Angel, Xander and Cordelia, Giles and Jenny, the start of Willow and Oz, and Spike and Drusilla. We can see that all of Buffy's aspects, Giles is Sophis the mind, Willow is Spiritus the spirit, Xander is Animus the heart, and Buffy is Manus the hand, are now all coupled up. Buffy as the hand is the physical manifestation of the other aspects, the physical action taken after the debate between the mind, spirit and heart. Willow as a spirit is currently establishing a deeper connection. Her and Oz didn't connect entirely because of the physical. It was far more spiritual, more a meeting of energies than the other Scoobies did. They riff off one another, are at ease with one another, entirely comfortable. Their connection is far more natural between them than it is between the other couples. It lacks the awkwardness and conflict that the others have. Giles as the mind has always represented intellect and wisdom, what one hopefully gains through lived experience as they become an adult. It's rather telling here that in an episode where all the other aspects are finding happiness in coupling, that the mind, that lived experience of wisdom, isn't. This makes sense. Buffy has no ability to think clearly in this area or any past experience to draw on. That will change in the next episode, but it's fascinating to see it absent here. If we take Giles's history though with Jenny up until this point as a relatable experience for Buffy, it suggests that Buffy and Angel will end when Angel is taken over by a demon released by Buffy's unintentional actions. Awkward. Xander as the heart is probably the most informative here. Buffy's metaphorical heart here is drawn to her what-if self, attraction through conflict, currently hidden behind closed doors in basements. The basement represents something beneath the surface, something hidden, some deeper issue. So it makes sense that Xander and Cordelia are a secret from everyone else. Xander doesn't like Cordelia, but is inexplicably drawn to her, and vice versa. This acts as a warning for Buffy. Xander and Cordelia's attraction is built in conflict and circumstance. And as something hidden, this is something that Buffy may subconsciously believe about her and Angel. That removed from this situation, there is nothing substantial there. That it lacks the real connection that the heart desires and that the spirit is trying to make. So what does all this mean for Buffy? Well, we saw in Some Assembly Required that the warning for Buffy is to consider the issues from all her aspects, and that they need to balance and temper each other. It reminds me of the Magi supercomputers in Neon Genesis Evangelion. They represented the woman, the mother, and the scientist, the three aspects to be balanced in any decision, and were named after the Magi of the Bible, known as the Three Wise Men. Buffy's metaphorical mind currently can't really help her. She has no experience or wisdom to draw upon here, she's winging it. Her metaphorical spirit is establishing this deeper connection, something beyond mere attraction, and we'll see throughout Buffy that it is Angel she finds comfort in. She says in a much later episode when he's gone that her first thought when she needs someone is still to run to him. That spiritual connection is there. But given we are talking on matters of love, it is probably her metaphorical heart that we should listen to the most. Xander is engaged in a hidden and very wrong attraction. He and Cordelia are completely wrong for each other. If I remember rightly, Joss says as much in a commentary later in the season. Buffy may feel that her attraction to Angel is also wrong. She has already acknowledged that it won't work out long ago in season 1. Yet the connection of being, as I said last episode, two mythical magical unicorns is a fairly powerful desire. Further, as I said, Cordelia represents the what-if Buffy, and Buffy's metaphorical heart is drawn to this other version of her. And subconsciously at least, I think this represents Buffy being drawn to the other version of Angel, the monster in him. And that her acceptance of who he is when she kisses him in Vamp Face is an acknowledgement of that she accepts that it is a part of him and she loves all of him. There is one more couple, Spike and Drusilla. I have made the comparison between Spike and Buffy before, and as we get further into this season, you'll also see the comparisons between Buffy and Drusilla as well. Spike and Drusilla represent the literal demonization of sex in this series, which we'll discuss in later episodes as it becomes more apparent, but it is telling that the only people who are overtly sexual so far in the show are mostly evil demons. Spike, our representation of chaotic lust, killed the Chosen One, the last vestige of Buffy's childhood as she embraced her role as the Slayer. Spike himself is a representation of immaturity of another form. Spike killed the Chosen One because the Chosen One was essentially an eternal child who would never attain adulthood. But Spike's actions so far are the actions of a hormonal and emotional teenager, of an inability to grow beyond this next stage of development. He is essentially what Giles would have been if Giles had remained in his chaos dark magic phase with Ethan Rayne. Spike's love for Drew mirrors Buffy's love for Angel shown earlier this season, that intense teenage desire that is all emotion and no reason, that results in over-dramatic proclamations such as, "When you kiss me I want to die." That will change in the future, but at this point in the series, that is what Spike represents. As I mentioned in Lie to Me, Drusilla represents someone stuck in a state of perpetual childhood, someone who can never really grow up and achieve adulthood, someone unable to go through the journey that Buffy is going through. So Drusilla represents a defiling of innocence, a child made into a monster by Angelus. Buffy, of course, by sleeping with Angel in innocence, will inadvertently turn him into a monster. And Drusilla, a monstrous creation, is the audience's biggest warning of what that future holds for Buffy. The show loves to put up contrasts and comparisons, both character studies and metaphorical or thematic. And up until now, we haven't really had that type of comparison for Xander. But now we have Oz. Oz is a stark contrast to Xander. He is everything that Xander wishes he was. Oz's understanding of who he is, what he wants, and his respectful outlook on people and life in general give him a maturity and unique perspective in the show, and sits in stark contrast to the immature, insecure, and often misogynistic Xander. Xander is not without his good qualities. He will go above and beyond to save his friends, often putting himself in danger to do so. We saw that right from the start in The Harvest, when he followed Buffy underground to save Jesse. But we often see Xander engage in casual misogyny and utter some misogynistic lines. I mean, we get a good example of them in these episodes, such as, "That's what a lot of the guys say, but it's just locker room talk." His guardianship over Buffy's virginity is just really gross, because it comes from a position of ownership, that her virginity is his to take, that he is somehow owed it. And his casual disregard of Willow's feelings for him, which he knows she has, is somewhat cruel. Contrast that to Oz's response to Buffy grabbing his throat and pushing him against the wall when she is nervous about the Order of Taraka. When she apologises and lets go and walks off, Oz doesn't say she's a crazy bitch or she's hysterical or emotional, all terms used to be highly dismissive of women and assert that they are unfit or ill-equipped to handle stressful situations. Hysteria, of course, has its etymological roots in the Greek word for uterus, and for much of history was considered a woman's only malady. No, Oz doesn't use words generally used to dismiss women. He simply says, that is a tense person, something very non-gendered and one that isn't dismissive just because Buffy is a woman. It is a very progressive outlook for something filmed 2 decades ago, given that gendered language is such a current cultural topic. Now, in Xander's defense, he shouldn't come across as mature and with such an emotionally developed outlook. He is the product of an abusive home situation and is currently on the same journey as Buffy, moving from childhood to adulthood. We've seen in episodes like Never Kill on the Boy on the First Date that he still has his Tweety Bird watch, that he still hadn't resolved to embrace his impending adulthood, which, given his childhood isn't particularly good, seems odd. But like Buffy, he is only stepping into that more adult sexual realm now. Oz, on the other hand, is more grown up and has a far more zen outlook on life. As far as we're aware, he doesn't have the childhood that Xander has. And Oz, in the context of this season, given that sexual maturity is a major theme, isn't a virgin. He's already sexually experienced. He's already a man now because of it. He's already made that transition from child to adult. But we'll see in later episodes too how respectful he is of Willow and her sexual maturation, gently rebuffing her when she goes to make her first time about Xander and Cordelia. And you can see that Willow falls in love with him right in that moment because of it. The comparison between them is interesting because we get told often that Xander is the voice of the everyman. And Joss himself has said that Xander is basically him, is basically his voice. And you contrast this immature, insecure character with the philosophical and comfortable Oz, you have an interesting duality. Of course, they can't have any character be perfect. Oz has to have flaws, and Oz's will come later this season. I've noted most of the stuff worth discussing in these eps, but a couple of extras that I find interesting. Buffy calls Kendra the Pink Ranger. Sophia Crawford, who was Sarah Michelle Gellar's stunt double, was also the stunt double for the Pink Ranger in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Marty Noxon in the commentary talks about how they had to have a special bug wrangler and they had bug auditions to determine which bugs would be used for Norman Pfister. Story-wise, it's revealed next episode that the contract with the Order of Taraka has been called off. So that loose end is tied up. Now there are so many good lines in this episode, but we've already talked about which one my favourite, so here it is.
The monkey's the only cookie animal that gets to wear clothes, you know that? You have the sweetest smile I've ever seen. So I'm wondering, do the other cookie animals feel sort of ripped, like is the hippo going, hey man, where are my pants? I have my hippo dignity. And you know, the monkeys just, I mock you with my monkey pants. And then there's a big coup in the zoo.
The monkey is French?
All monkeys are French, you didn't know that?
No.
Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this look into the Buffyverse, please like, subscribe to the channel, and consider supporting through our Patreon. We've just added a whole heap of tiers in there. If you've disagreed with anything I said or have anything else I missed, please put it in the comments below, and I'll see you next video.